Hi, I'm Dr. Robin Koslowitz, clinical psychologist, parenting educator, and post-traumatic parent. Welcome to the Post-Traumatic Parenting Podcast, where we learn to provide our children with a healthy childhood, even if ours was anything but. Or maybe we had a wonderful childhood, but recent events in our lives have left us reeling. Let's face it, after 2020, we're all post-traumatic parents now. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Post-Traumatic Parenting Podcast Season 3. Today, I'm really excited to bring a resource that a lot of you have not heard of that would really be helpful. This is Nancy Shapiro Rapport. She is one of the founders of an incredible app and movement, really, called Our Family Culture. And this is something that I think most post-traumatic parents know. We talk a lot about family culture, family values, policies and procedures in post-traumatic parenting because so many of us have this idea that I did not witness a family that was mindfully created or parenting that was done with like thought and intention, and I'd like to do that, but I don't even know where to start. So this is a resource for anyone who says, I don't have a roadmap there. That's really what Our Family Culture is like. So it's a little bit different because I feel like the last few episodes we've been interviewing authors. So this is about something entirely different that I think is going to be really interesting for a lot of us. So welcome, Nancy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Robin. I'm very excited for this conversation with you.
So tell us a little bit about your, background or how you started, what Our Family Culture is, all that stuff.
Sure. So I am a retired educator. I was a English teacher turned school counselor, and so I spent the majority of my career, of my 34-year career, as a middle school counselor.
Wow. And, actually, my mom was a school counselor. That's cool. Yeah, she was a guidance counselor. Yeah.
So you kind of know, back when they called it guidance counselor. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so I've spent a lot of my career. I spent so much of my time at work working with not only kids, which was what I was there for, but working with their families, their parents, their guardians, and learned, it's just that is a lesson that you get every single day of how to be with people, how to listen for them, how to speak with them, and how to help them sort of see some things that maybe they can't see on their own. And
it's true that there's no such thing as a child, I have to say, right? Like you're never working just with a child. It's never the fifth grader in front of you. Yeah.
Oh gosh, no. There's a whole lot of other bodies in that room that you can't see, but they're there.
Yeah.
So my brother is also a retired educator, and he focused a lot on experiential learning. He was he had a podcast. He was program director. He did some very cool work in his 34 years as an educator. And we're kind of best friends, which is also cool. And we have been talking probably for the past 8 or 9 years about what we wanted to do in retirement. And we kept talking about things that we thought we could do that might be impactful. And we kept coming back to the same thing, which is it's really hard to create change in a school system. In any system, really. Systems are difficult when there are powers that be that you have to go through a lot of hoops. And so what we thought about was where the real support is needed is with parents. We wanted to sort of create something where instead of looking back at how can we repair what we've done, we wanted to look more upstream at how can we create a family culture, and we really focus on the idea of family culture. How do we create a family culture that is sort of based on our deepest held values and that we can practice in small ways often enough, sort of month after month, year after year kind of thing, that it's just part of who we are. It's just our family. This is who we are.
So interesting because I think a lot of parents don't think about family as having a culture or that you need to be intentional about a family culture. And it was one of the chapters in the post-traumatic parenting book that people speak to and they say like, Wow, I never thought of that. Like policies and procedures and culture and values and how those things work together, right? Like when you say something like, in this family we communicate with respect, right? Or, in this family, we talk about our problems. We talk to people, not about people, right? Whatever the
Right.
specific procedure that is, that's reflective of a certain underlying culture that tells us
Yeah.
what we value, right? And for a lot of people who were parented by default or were parented in a completely different context than the way they're parenting now, it becomes something that, like, once you notice it, you're like, oh my goodness, right, we don't have a culture for this family, or what is our culture? And maybe we can create one.
Sure. Well, I mean, truthfully, any group you're a part of has its own culture. Think about the many different ways that you sort of modulate yourself so that you are fitting into the culture that you are in the moment. And as teachers, we would create culture every year. Me as a counselor as well, like every year it would be letting kids know sort of what was valuable, how we were going to treat each other, what we would allow and what we wouldn't allow, and how we wanted to make sure that we were respectful of everybody, regardless of how they showed up in the room. And that can be very hard in a school system, right?
Yeah.
I think when you're a teacher, you get to practice that, right? The first couple years that you do it, you're not so great at it, or you're trying to be like really tough and, authoritative. And then you realize, like, no, these are my kids. This is my family for the next year. And we are going to build a culture together. And depending on how I set that up in the beginning is going to depend on what my year is like. And
Right.
then as we thought about it together, and when I say we, I'm referring to me and my brother, as we thought about it more, it was like, families are cultures. And right, like you said, they're cultures by default or design. And our intention is to support people in building family cultures by design.
Wow. How do you define culture? Because I feel like it's a word we use a lot, but maybe people don't really know what it means.
Yeah. A culture is simply how we are together. How we speak
How
with
we
each
are
other.
together. Okay.
Yeah. How we treat each other. What we do when things go wrong, because of course in every culture things go wrong. You can equate it, think of any place where culture building happens, whether it's in the workplace or it's on a sports team or it's on a whatever it is. Those cultures are built, and there's a coach or there's a boss or there's somebody who is determining what that culture is. And with families it's no different. But what was interesting for us, we did a lot of focus groups with parents. And when we would talk with people who were couples that were parenting together, which isn't always the case, it was so interesting when we would ask them to just separately write down like the top 5 values that are most important to you in your family and not share. And then they came together to share. And, we would ask how many of you got one that was the same, and some people got one that was the same, some people got 2 that was the same, and beyond that they didn't. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget this one father said, how is it possible for us to have the exact same thing written down? I thought, because you're intentional about it. It's important
Yeah.
to know what you value in your family.
Yeah. How do you see values and cultures working together?
Well, the culture that you're a part of practices values, whether you name them or you don't. And so I sometimes think about, especially in working with middle school kids, that kids always talked about being a part of a friend group. And a friend group had different people who ran the group, different people who decided how things were going to go. And in some groups, I remember I used to always want to help kids recognize that being a part of the most popular group is not the most comfortable place to exist, because there's all kinds of pretense and all kinds of things that have to happen in order to be considered part of that group. And it sometimes is really outside of who you really are as a person. So I think the culture, the values that people espouse come out in their group? Is this a place where we talk kindly about people, or is it a place where we talk unkindly about people? You know, is it a place where we look out for each other, or a place where we make fun of each other? Who are we?
Yeah, I've actually heard that a lot, right? Like when I've worked with kids, I've heard it with my own kids where, you get into a group that's not aligned with your values. And at first it's like, yeah, I'm with the popular kids, right?
Right.
And then you start feeling like this dissonance between them and your values. And if you have a good, strong sense of self, you say, well, it's been nice trying out popular for a while, but this is not the friend group for me, and you move on, right? Because it
Yeah.
can be very difficult to be in a situation that's that's very dissonant to your values.
Yeah, but the thing you said, Robin, is so pivotal. It's like, if you have a strong sense of self, and how do you develop a strong sense of self? Well, who's your ultimate homeroom? Your ultimate homeroom is your family. And if you don't learn how to, I mean, truthfully, when we started doing this, we wanted to provide something for our children that we wish that we would have had in our family growing up. We grew up with a mom and a dad, and they did their very best, and we were pretty, we had a pretty, what people would consider a normal childhood. But trust me, there were traumas in there as well. And I think people parent the best they know how, but they're not given any kind of roadmap. We don't get that instruction of, now what? What do we do to create an amazing family? And the goal at our family culture is to really sort of plan backwards. Imagine your child walking across that stage at high school graduation. Imagine that. And what do you want? Who do you want that person to be? What do you want them what do you want to be able to smile at? What do you want to be able to be proud of when you see that child? And so how are you going to build that into your family's culture such that your child internalizes and knows this is who we are?
So it's almost like that didn't happen by accident, right? Like that kid walking across the stage at graduation with that strong sense of self, or with a sense of, the ability to handle life's challenges or whatever, that didn't happen. You're saying that didn't happen by accident. Like that was very intentionally created through a family culture.
I believe so. Occasionally it happens by accident, but the accident is, hey, this is what my family valued, and I'm just repeating it. Right, so it could be accidental and not intentional in a good way. It could be accidental and in a bad way as well, where you're repeating things and patterns and habits that you learned, that if you would go back and talk to your parents, they might say, yeah, I wish we hadn't done it that way.
And so how do you create that when it comes to users? So you have an app, and you're helping parents create the culture they want intentionally. So what happens when they open the apps? They open our family culture, and what do they get?
Yep, when they open our family culture, and by the way, what they get is hang on, I'm going to redo that. Okay. When they open the app, what they will see is they'll download the app, and then they'll be taken through some questions about things that are important to them as a family. And so just sort of trying to get a sense of what's important, what are some of those values. Once you get into the app, once you download it, and my brother and I are a part of it with you. There are videos from us, we're talking to you. We're of the school that we just don't like the apps where you just get in there and just start pressing buttons and trying to figure out how things work. So we've tried to walk along, and we're building a community of parents who are trying to parent very intentionally. What we've built is a system that is based on a fundamental system that a person named David Friedman created, and he was very intentional. He wrote Culture by Design, and that was all about building culture in business. And the system has been used by thousands of people, and it's been replicated, and people really love it. And what we thought was, what if we could provide that same type of thing with families? And so there are 44 fundamentals currently, because I have a feeling we're going to keep adding more to the bank of fundamentals, but there are 44 fundamentals, And the first thing that you're asked to do is to choose your fundamentals. And we recommend, like I said before, that if you're working with a partner, that you and your partner do this exercise by yourself. That you each pick your top however many fundamentals, and they're all good, so you're going to want them all, right? I mean, and just because you don't pick one doesn't mean it's not something you value. It's like, what are the key things that you value? But the fundamentals are values, but they're written as behaviors. And so if you want to raise a kid who is resilient, you might choose the fundamental bounce back. And so when you're talking about resiliency, you're not using, and we imagine young kids really doing this from a very early age. And so if you choose the fundamental bounce back, instead of saying, oh, you're not being resilient, you have a shorthand that if your child gets disappointed about something and wants to quit as a result of their disappointment, it's like, well, how are you going to bounce back? Let's talk about bouncing.
I want to unpack two things that you said that I think are so important. Number one is this idea, and I think a lot of post-traumatic parents, because many of us lack discernment, right? A lot of us are like, wait, everything sounds good or everything sounds bad. Yeah. The idea that values are inherently hierarchical. You can, and you never can, value two opposite things at the same time. Ultimately, you have to put your energy, you can value it in an abstract sense, but ultimately, like you said about behavior, you have to put your behavior and your attention into one. Meaning, if you value your kids having a spontaneous creative childhood, and like there's lots of adventure and there's lots of exploration, you can't also value having an extremely neat and organized lifestyle. Those two things are antithetical. You can have seasons, like in the summer we're more adventurous, and in the winter we're more organized, but you can't simultaneously value both, because your actions can't simultaneously value both. Because if you're very organized and methodical, then dinner is like 6 p.m. every night. Then if suddenly there's an art show in the next town at 6 p.m., you got to pick one. So you're either valuing spontaneity or you're valuing organization and structure. And that's not to say, I would say, or you value them both and you decide in that moment which value supersedes the other. Right. Tonight, it's important that we have dinner at this time, or maybe tonight it's not important that we do, and we're going to go to the next town to see this art show because it's going to be cool. We're never going to see it if we don't just be spontaneous. But the idea that I think for a lot of post-traumatic parents, they're always, even when you are successfully upholding a certain value, you then start questioning yourself, or maybe that's just me, but I've heard this a lot from post-traumatic parents of like, oh, but what about this other thing, right, that I don't do, and you feel bad about yourself. When it's like, no, but that's not my value, right? If someone grew up in a very chaotic home, so she really sees how important it is to value structure for kids, and how important it is to like really, and so she really does structure, she can't beat herself up that she's not giving her kids as much adventure as like the mom that she sees on TikTok, right? You can't simultaneously do both. You can pick one over the other, or you could be like season and season, or sometimes you have a child whose needs supersede, right? So like if you have a child who's neurodiverse, you might need more structure, or you might need less structure, right? And then you can't feel bad about that because that's the situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. Right. I don't have more to say about that. It seems to me that the fact that you're like, you're having that choice format allows people to think, well, I do value this, but not as much as I value this. And that's totally fine. Like, you don't have to value what your best friend values, or you don't have to value what your family of origin valued, or what, some influencer on TikTok, or even me, right? Like what I value. Some people are going to value other things, and that's completely and totally okay. And you might look at the list of fundamentals and see some on there and be like, oh, that's a choice. Like, I can choose wonder, like, which is just all about being curious about the world. That's something I can choose as one of my part of my family culture. That's cool. Never thought about that. Right. There's a lot, and there's a myriad of fundamentals that cover lots of different things. The other thing is, when you're doing this then with a partner, you come together and you have to look at what you each put down, which is, I think, the most interesting feedback we've gotten thus far is that, I mean, I parented for the most part by myself, but I had a partner until my kids were, in elementary school. And but when you're parenting with a partner, if you end up looking at each other's lists and being like, I didn't know that, and then you start having conversations about why it's important to me. Well, when I was growing up, my family did this, and it always made me feel blank, right? So it's giving parenting partners the opportunity to learn things about each other that they might never ever know, because we don't talk about my experience, I should say, and my experience in watching thousands of families that I've worked with, is that oftentimes they don't know what's important to the other person, or it's complete default. Oh, she takes care of the homework, I take care of this. I take care of the sports.
Right.
And that's okay if you're doing it on purpose. But oftentimes it's just simply you lean into that role because that's what feels best to you. Great, but let's name it. Let's identify who's going to be doing, if we're going to choose create as one of our values, and I'm the creative one, and you're not creative at all, I'm going to say, it's important enough to me that I'm going to take ownership of that one. And I'd like to invite you, dear partner, when I want to do something that's creative, to participate with curiosity so that the kids can see that you're getting out of your comfort zone and trying something.
Right. And that's so cool, because I think a lot of times we don't know each other's origin stories. And I think a lot of times when we're dating, sometimes we have a conversation about, like, I believe this is important, but that's important, what I mean by that and what you mean by that is completely different. Right? Like,
Exactly.
Does family dinner mean sitting around a table to a formal meal, or does family dinner mean we all watch sports together while eating on the couch? Right? We both said we valued family dinner, or we think that's a really important thing to do, but what we meant by it is entirely different.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a big thing. And the notion of, we also say, like, when you choose your fundamentals, if your kids are old enough, we invite you to have them be as much a part of the process as they can be. But if you're choosing fundamentals for young children that don't have that capacity yet, you choose what you choose, and you can always be flexible later. But we always caution parents to be really clear about the fundamentals they choose and be prepared to follow them. Because if you, for example, one of the fundamentals we think that most everyone selects is practice kindness. And if you choose practice kindness, and then you're on the phone with a friend and you're saying something unkind about another friend as an adult, your kids are going to catch you.
Yeah.
That's not what we do in this family. And so you have to be prepared to live those out. And that's not to say you're not going to mess it up. Give me a break. We all mess things up. But how do we handle things when we mess them up? One of our fundamentals is lean into mistakes. Mistakes are important. We have to make mistakes. And the important thing about the mistakes we make is how we learn from them, and how we grow, and how we help each other to learn and grow from them.
I actually loved what you're saying, which is, like, if your kids catch you on something, it sort of recasts it as helpful as opposed to disrespectful, right? Like, I have certainly had my kids, like, reflect back to me, like, Mommy, that wasn't communicating with respect, right? Because that's one of our big values. And thank you. That's right. That was not, I was really stressed out, and I let my big feelings dictate and be in the driver's seat for a moment. And you are right. That was not communicating with respect, and I need to fix that.
Yeah, exactly. And how rich of a learning experience is that for your children when that happens, that they understand that you're a vulnerable person too, and that you're a human as well, and that you, even though you're a lot older and you've lived a lot more life, you make mistakes as well.
Yeah. And also the idea that like feedback is the recipe for how to be my friend, right? Feedback's just feedback. It's not inherently, it's not you are a bad person. It's you did something that you need to correct, which I think also is a skill, a way of thinking about feedback that's hard sometimes for kids. I'm sure you saw this as a middle school counselor, like that's the age where feedback is so hard and like they're so worried about their grades and like their public speaking or whatever they have to do, where it's like the feedback feels very personal. To learn how to like take feedback by modeling feedback and taking it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it was always an interesting thing for me because we believe this is something that teachers could, and we could do this for teachers in the classroom at some point. Right now we're working with parents, but the idea that as adults, we have to recognize when we have made a mistake, and there are a lot of adults who don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so really, like we're aware that the audience that we're reaching out to are people who are really very curious and interested in being intentional about the families that they create. I was listening to one of your episodes that you were talking with, I can't remember the name of the person at the moment, but you were telling a story about your daughter who was real athletic, was in elementary school, and the teacher asked if they wanted they were going to go play a game. Did they want to play with a hardball or a softball? And there was a disabled child in the classroom. And your daughter said, well, let's play with the softball so we can all play. And someone sort of gave the about that. And your daughter had a great sense of justice, which one of the fundamentals for justice is do the right thing. But what she did is she stood up to that person and said, I want everyone to be included. And if we can't all be included, I'm going to go play with her. I'm going to go play with the child with a disability. So I'm sure this sounds familiar to you. I don't know if it was an episode that was yesterday or 3 years ago, but
it was about, let's see, she was probably in 5th or 6th and she's in 9th now. So yeah, it was a while ago, 4 years ago.
So it's a while ago. But you said something in telling that story that really, it was like a poster for our family culture, because what your daughter did is she stood up, she wanted to do the right thing, and she also wanted to include others, which is another fundamental that we have, is just include others. It's important to be able to let people feel like they are a part of something. And if you're in a classroom with them, you're part of a classroom together. And then later on that same day, I think the same person who snubbed the her wanting to use the softball to play made a comment about the weirdos who go to the OT room. Yeah. And your daughter said, I'm one of the weirdos that goes to the OT room. And when she came home to you to tell you that story, I don't know if you remember what you said, but it was like exactly the feeling that we want parents to have when they're using our family culture. And what happened was your daughter came home and told you the story and said, I knew, Mommy, that you'd be proud of me when I told that story, and your eyes would sparkle at me.
Yeah. I was a kid who was left out as a child. So for me, and my children happen to be, it's interesting because my children happen to be much more confident and outgoing. I think they're naturally extroverts because they take after my husband in temperament, a lot of it. Yeah. I think they're having a much less stressful childhood than I had because I grew up with a very ill parent. So they just had very different experiences than I had. But some of it is also their temperament. And I remember actually one of my kids was very popular. And for a moment, I had this reaction to this child's popularity, like I felt threatened by it. Like I know how to do anxious and socially insecure. I don't know how to do like king of the class, popular. Like for a moment, I was almost like, he's gonna become a bully. Like if he's popular, he's gonna become a bully. Like that was an instinct in my head, and I had to really work on that. Like work on we always say your inner child can't raise a child, right? So my inner child was like experiencing this teacher saying, "Oh, your son is like the king of the class. He's so popular," as almost like threatening. And then I said, "Wait, but you can also be a good popular person. You can be a kind, inclusive, caring popular person." And then it became very important for me to intentionally teach that, because otherwise my inner child would have had a barrier to connection with that son, if you know what I mean. I'm getting super deep, but yeah.
No, of course. And And you had access to that because of who you are and what you know. You had access to that. You know what kind of childhood you had. You've studied child development. You're a very accomplished psychologist, and you know what you're doing and what you're talking about. And the same thing went for me. I was I knew my craft very well as a school counselor, and then my son ended up being diagnosed on the autism spectrum. That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And
which was so hard back then. Like, people didn't know about it. Like, you have that energy
terrible.
of like the best school guidance counselors that I love, of like this, just that like can do, we're going to teach kids skills, we're going to help them. But on the spectrum back then must have been really hard.
It was terrible. But what I remember is I would go to work every day and I had resources around me whose brains I could pick. And I would learn and I would learn and it didn't make it, it made it easier because I had access to that. But you had, in the moment that you just described, you had access to know and to talk yourself through. My anxiety is coming up because I don't want my son to be a popular bully.
Right.
And if he is, I won't be able to feel the love for him that I want to be able to feel. And so what I would profess that our family culture is designed to give people the tools to really talk through and understand who you are as parents and who you are raising, the little adults that you're raising. Because we know we're not raising children. We don't want to raise these little humans to be children. We want to raise them to be healthy,
future
functioning adults.
Yeah. I love that you're saying that. It's interesting because when you were saying, like, you were giving me all that praise about, like, knowing what I'm doing, I think like most post-traumatic parents, I felt as a young mom like I did not know what I was doing. And I even remember, I have it in the book, that a nurse, when I had my oldest daughter, a nurse handed her to me and she said, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, I'm a grad student at NYU studying child psychology." And she said, "Oh, wow, this baby's so lucky. Like that's great, a child psychologist for a parent." And I remember like bursting into tears when the nurse left. Aww. Because I just I looked at my daughter, I was like, "Oh no, poor you have me for a parent." Like, I felt so traumatized then and so unsure of myself that I didn't know how to parent. And I think, what you're saying about, building an app where people who have that sensation of, I don't know how to do this, I kind of fuzzily know the future adult I'd like my kids to be, but I have no clue how to get there. I think this is so helpful because it takes so much work to sit down and parent intentionally. And when you want to do it, but there's no tools, it's terrifying.
Yeah, and that was our goal. And truthfully, the goal was to make it super easy to use, which it is, and to make it something that is able to be repeated day after day, week after week, month after month, until it just is in your bones. Because, as educators, we know that you don't learn anything once, by hearing it once or by doing it once. You learn it by experiencing it and by having it repeated over and over again. But you can't teach the same lesson over and over again every day. So what we do is what the app walks you through is you select, let's say, you're using the fundamental system. You would choose, I think the minimum is 13 fundamentals, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. You can choose 13 to as many as you want, probably no more than 20, 25 at the most. But what you do is you practice one fundamental a week. And then you get to the end of, if you've chosen 20 fundamentals, at the end of 20 weeks, you start back at fundamental number 1. And we're providing curated content that's not complicated. It's not add another 15 minutes to our day. It's what are some routines that we currently have where we can implement this. So is it when we're going to bed and this is, we're having a little talk with our kids, or is it at the family dinner table, if that's a value that we have, that we're going to eat dinner together and talk with each other? Is it in the car when we're running carpool somewhere? It doesn't really matter as long as you have a way to have that conversation, do that little activity, which the activities are not big and complicated. Watch.
Could we
that
contextualize
video.
it? Let's say it's bounce back.
Yeah.
So what would what would happen? Let's say that's a really important fundamental for you.
For sure. So So you get so the content comes through as you get 4 pieces of content a week, really 5, but the content is in the form of discussion questions, videos, scenarios, quotes, activities. And the reason we say 4 a week is because on Wednesdays we have something special we call Wisdom Wednesdays, where we just have a variety of people who are sharing a little nugget of parenting wisdom. It doesn't matter what fundamental you're working on. It's like applicable to all. And so if you're doing bounce back, we could say that, and I'll tell you one of my very favorite activities is, or things that pop up are, we have parent vulnerability questions, which is, I think, so critical. And so let's say bounce back Monday, you might get a piece of content that says, parents, this is for the adults. Think of a time when you were younger and something happened and you couldn't bounce back from it. Tell your kids the story and tell them what you wish you would have done differently. Or if you don't wish you would have done anything differently, tell them the impact, the result of what happened. So that would be a type of parent vulnerability question. There could be a video a little YouTube video maybe, where you're watching together 2 or 3 minute at the most video of a situation where you see somebody who is bouncing back from, it could be anything. My brother is the expert of finding the best videos on earth. He's great at it. There could be an activity where maybe you don't have a bounce back situation happening currently, but you know someone who is having a hard time getting over something. So maybe you could there's an activity that week that's like, think of someone you know who's having a really hard time bouncing back from something. Think about 3 things you could say to them, or write them a note, or what's something you can do to try and be a supportive friend to that person. So it's that kind of thing. It's not complicated. And you have the opportunity to really reflect and talk about things so that when your kids come home from school, when they're older, it's not, how was school today? It's not, what did you do? It's, who's the person that you saw bounce back today during your day? What happened and what did you see them do? So now you're noticing and you're being aware of other people's ability to react in a certain way. And when you, as a part of your family, embody the fundamentals that you're working on, people feel it. They know it.
Yeah, and it's about, I think, I love those intentional questions of who did you see bounce back today, right? Here's this clip, this character, do you see how they're bouncing back, or they're not bouncing back and that's causing them a problem? I think that's so helpful because the child doesn't feel shamed and blamed. It feels like a skill we're all working on together.
Exactly. And another thing that we have in the app, we have a journal feature where you can just take a quick video or a picture or something that you want to remember about a child. You can tag a certain child, but you can have it be the whole family of something cool that happened that week about that particular fundamental. You could do a video, you could do just a voice recording. And so you have this log of how we as a family have developed into embodying these fundamentals. And the other thing that we have is children's books. And so with every fundamental, we have a list of children's books that you can get and read with your kids. So especially if you're doing this with children who are very young, because kids are all different ages. We don't splice this out by age. We sort of let parents be the drivers of the content and modify whatever's best for their child. But children's books are a great way to teach.
Yeah.
And
I actually love children's books. And I think that children's books, I think you can use children's books with adults. I use children's books in therapy all the time. I think if you can't say something in a way that a 4-year-old doesn't get it, then you don't really get it. But I find that, there's something about trying to teach a capacity using a story that's relatable, that you can do that when you're 6, when you're 16, when you're 26, so I love that.
Yeah. And so we're trying to make it as robust as possible, but as easy to use as possible. Parents are busy. They're trying to add one thing to their routine is hard, and we recognize that and we honor that. So it's not, when people say, oh, you can meditate, just take 15 minutes a day. It's like, I don't know where I'm going to find 15 minutes a day. It's not like that. We just want it to be part of your daily routine.
I always laugh about those things because it's like, sometimes with kids with therapy homework, I remember talking to a very beginner therapist and she was giving therapy homework and the parent was like, I didn't have time to do it with my daughter. She's like, you didn't have 5 minutes a day to sit down and do this practice? No. Now, I can sell you on the idea of, let's say you have a kid who's constantly asking for reassurance, and we decide to schedule worry time, which is kind of the, sort of empirically validated way to deal with childhood anxiety. You'll learn that if you take like a space class or, supportive parenting for anxious children or any of those things, right, where I might say to a mom, look, instead of constantly reassuring all day long, if you schedule worry time for 10 minutes in the evening, it saves you time for the rest of the day. That's different than being like, find 5 extra minutes to, do a loving kindness meditation. There are no 5 extra minutes. I just remember looking at this very young therapist and being like, let's give you a few years. Right now your one child is a baby, and like, babies are a little bit more predictable than when you have someone who has soccer practice and someone else who is a baby and someone else who's toilet training. Like 5 minutes is actually a big ask.
Right. And if your kids have been practicing this since they were young, then they start teaching it to their siblings. It becomes a really important thing that they do with their siblings as well. And so, we're so excited about the potential that this system has in bringing the world, making the world a better place, one family at a time, and recognizing that we all, my family culture blueprint could look very different from your family culture blueprint, although we probably have a couple of the same fundamentals because some of them are pretty fundamental.
Right.
And
like you're not going to find, you're almost never going to find a parent who's going to be like, nah, kindness, not important, right? Like, although, it's funny because the last episode I just recorded with Tessa Latifi, who's a journalist who wrote a book about momfluencer culture and kidfluencing, and I actually witnessed an incredibly horrible episode of bullying once that a child was doing in front of her parent, and the parent was applauding that as oh, she's a little businesswoman, she knows how to negotiate. And I remember thinking, like, so you're not teaching your child that kindness matters at all. What happens when this kid gets older and perhaps you are the one in need of kindness? Like, I wonder where that goes in life. Everyone should listen to that episode because I think I'm purposely I'm teasing it because it's the episode before this one. I think it was, I think that story, it's so funny because that particular story where I witnessed this influencer kid really bullying an adult really told me something about how algorithms can take parents' brains and take them away. So I like the way you're taking an algorithm and you're using it towards parenting intentionally, because I think mostly what our phones do is take us away from parenting intentionally. So you're like sort of counterbalancing that of like, no, your phone can be super helpful as a tool for parenting mindfully.
Yeah. Well, and we are so aware of the youth mental health crisis. We've been following it. We've been working with kids who are impacted by it and families. And I think what's so important is to be able to give people the tools that they need to try and understand how to raise stronger kids who know what's important, who know what it means to be part of your family. And so if kindness isn't important in your family, like I said, like you said, I can't imagine that would be a thing, then you're a momfluencer who allows that example that you gave to happen, and you rename it and you call it something else. Oh, look what a good businesswoman, she's going to be. But what you also want to do, my brother often uses an example, like his wife is very much, my sister-in-law is so about being respectful, like to adults, like it's really important to respect adults because it's just the right thing to do. It's kind, everything else. My brother is really big on um, on standing up for fight for what's right, like
Yeah.
if something doesn't make sense and it's not right, fight for what's right. And so for them, if a child comes home from school and says, the teacher wanted to punish the whole class for something that one kid
Right.
did, and I was like, that's not fair. My brother might be like, yes, you fought for what was right. My sister might be like, that's not respectful. And so
Right.
then what they would do is work together with their children to say, how do we fight for what's right in a way that
Respectfully.
also is respectful?
Yeah, because I think that that's such an important also social skill, right? I mean, I do this with my kids all the time where like they'll say something snarky and I'll say, ouch, now can you say that in a way that's more easy to hear? Right?
Yeah.
And that's an important social skill. Like, then it's the idea of like, you're allowed to be mad, you're not allowed to be mean, right? You can be mad at me. You
Right.
can be like, I'm not in the mood of the dinner you made. You can be like, oh, mom, like whatever. You can be mad, but you can't
Yeah.
say it meanly. And if there's
Yeah.
something that you want to state respectfully, you want to give me feedback, you want to ask for something, whatever, there's a respectful way to do that. You also get further in life, right? Because the one kid who respectfully raises their hand and says, Mrs. Whatever, is it possible that, that whole thing happened
right.
with one kid in the class and the rest of us really are disavowing what that one kid did? That would potentially be a very effective way of negotiating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we're also in a culture of the screen time issue. We've got, kids are around screens so much and they have so much access to things that we never had access to. And yes, do we want to try and minimize the amount of screen time and the amount of social media platforms that kids are on? Yes, and how?
Right.
Because you can take it away. Kids are way smarter than we are when it comes
Yeah.
to figuring out alternate ways to get to the things that they want to get to.
Right.
And so if instead you're trying, if rather than trying to take away what they're seeing, instead if you have a child who's able to look at that and go, I don't like what that person's talking about. I'm not
Right.
following them. Or,
Yeah.
they're able to, you used the word at the beginning of our conversation, discernment, right?
Yeah.
Having the
Yeah.
discernment to know, building stronger kids. That's what we're out to do, build stronger kids.
I so love that. And I think as we're like wrapping up, I agree with you. I think that there's a space in between when it comes to screens and kids where just pearl clutching and saying, oh, kids are on screens too much. This is terrible. We need to ban screens. I also think what you said, like kids are smarter than us. I think it's not the kids. I think it's the kids plus the software developers together, because I honestly think that there are apps that are engineered to be easier for a child's brain to comprehend and navigate. And I think that's done mindfully. I really do. I think that it's
Yeah.
sort of like in a different context, the way like Disney knows how to like put in enough interesting stuff in a movie that an adult is also
Yeah.
getting a double entendre or getting a joke or a cultural reference, and you want to watch it even though whatever, versus something like Paw Patrol, which really doesn't, and like most adults are like, I can't sit through another like episode of Paw Patrol, right? And I think the apps sort of know how to work in such a way that kids just intuitively get them more than adults. And I do think that's mindful. I think that's somewhat predatory. But then to go to that other side of, could we have a conversation about this? What's our family culture about this? If our family culture is like we communicate with respect and you're on your phone during dinner, that's not respectful to the speaker, right? That doesn't make me feel very good. If like someone's sharing a very excited story of what happened in kindergarten and you're on your phone, like that wouldn't be fun for that kindergartner. That's not communicating with respect, right? And then that becomes a conversation of like, why was that so addictive that you couldn't put it down when you agree with this value, right? Like, and then it's not so shaming. It's so much more building.
That's right. And it's going back to what I was saying earlier about you and I have the tools to have these kinds of conversations. Not everybody does.
Right.
Not everybody does. And so what we're hoping to provide is some of the language and some of the tools and some of the ways to think about how you go about building that family culture such that you have kids who tell you things that make your eyes sparkle and that make your heart sing and that make you really, really proud. It's not for me, it was never, I remember going to parent conferences and the teacher would automatically slide my daughter's grades across the table to me. And I was like, I'm not worried about her grades. Like,
Right.
I know she's got good grades. Tell me who she is. What's she like
Right.
in your classroom? How is she with other kids? Like, that's what I want to know. I don't, if she was struggling with grades, maybe it would be different, but she wasn't.
Right.
My son, totally different story. He was autistic and you know, it was I say all the time, Robin, if I would have stopped after having my daughter, I would have thought that everyone was crazy and that parenting was easy.
Right.
And then I had
Yeah.
my son to make me super humble and to help
Yeah.
me learn and grow like crazy. And that's
Yeah,
what he's done.
totally.
And my kids are like both beautiful human beings that are making a contribution to the world in very, very different ways.
Yeah, totally. I had that also, right? Like I call that parenting Peter Rabbit, like most people are parenting in the old Peter Rabbit stories. Most people are parenting Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. Like most kids are like that. And then you get a Peter Rabbit every so often. And it's the best way to get you to doubt everything that you thought you knew about yourself or the world or parenting.
Right.
But it's helpful, right? Because it also makes us wise,
If we let it, if we allow
if we
it
let
to.
it. Yes,
If
I
we
love
let
that.
it.
That's
And
true.
that's the key. That's the
true.
key to that. Right?
So I feel like I could talk to you forever, but we're going to have to wrap up because of time. So
Sure.
where can people find our family culture if they want to check it out?
Yep, it is available to download on the Apple and Google Play stores.
Okay.
If you download the app, I really honestly encourage anyone who is curious at all to download the app. There's a 14-day free trial, so it gives you the opportunity to have access to all of the fundamentals and everything behind them. It gives you the opportunity to go through that exercise of choosing your fundamentals. And then it also gives you a full week of being able to practice one of your fundamentals. And I'm pretty sure that that will be enough to have people go, oh, they're onto something.
Yeah, this makes sense for me.
This is good. And we've made it incredibly, I think it's $4.99 a month.
Right.
Or $49.99 for a year. We tried to make it accessible to every family and for your listeners as well. If ever there's someone who says, I want to do that, but I can't, I don't have the extra $50 a year, then reach out to us directly and we'll take care of you.
Yeah.
It's more
that's
important
a
to us
very
that
generous
we're
offer.
building. Yeah, I mean, we want people to have access to this.
Yeah, this is amazing. And where can they find you on social media? I know you're on TikTok and Instagram.
We are on, so our family culture on TikTok with our _family_culture. We have a YouTube channel, and our family culture YouTube channel. You can find us there. And then you can find us on Instagram at our family culture. And then we also, my brother Stephen and I also have another channel on Instagram called Shapiro Sibs. And that's where we,
That's
are out in the world and we're experiencing fundamentals. I will say one last thing is that since we've been doing this work, the two of us have noticed in a very big way is that we are so much more intentional about living the fundamentals that we recognize that are important to us and naming them. And like I said, when I was listening to your episodes earlier, I heard fundamentals in every episode. I hear fundamentals popping out, and so we just want to make it easy and accessible for all people to be able to have the opportunity to talk to their kids the way you're able to do, and the way that I've learned to do. Because I wish I could go back and redo it. I wish I had our family culture when I was raising my kids.
Yeah, we all build what we would have needed when we were starting out. I think that's the essentials of
Right.
psychological health. Right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. I think that every post-traumatic parent is going to enjoy this episode. And for those of you who want to check it out, like Nancy said, you can find it on wherever you basically get your apps. So check it out.
Check out our family culture.
Yeah, really cool.
I'm here on social media to be descriptive, not prescriptive. I'm here to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain, but never to treat. If listening to this podcast helps you realize that you need therapy, I am all for that. But podcasts aren't therapy. Please reach out to a mental health professional licensed in your jurisdiction. You'll be glad you did. Wish Post-Traumatic Parenting was a talk show, not a podcast? You have a question for me or for my guests? Great news! You can ask those questions by following me on Instagram. My handle is @DrKoslowitz It's also in the show notes. I love it when people reach out, DM, or post a question. Who knows, your question might spark an entire episode. Come join our community. We get it. We're post-traumatic parents too. Can't wait to hear from you.